Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming out to the Bexley Public Library today. My name is Zach Parrish. I'm the programming librarian here. So before we get started with the program, I just want to mention today's event is a hybrid program. So we're very happy to have you all here at the library, but we do have an audience joining online over a live stream. So at the end, when we get to a Q&A, if you don't mind just raising your hand and I'll bring around the mic. That way those joining at home can hear what is asked. Another quick library plug. We just came out with our winter program guide, so if you haven't received one, we have a bunch on the back counter there. Today we had this amazing opportunity. I want to thank Bob Eckhart for bringing this to us. Bob is a graduate of Columbus Academy, and he taught at the OSU English department for over 20 years. And during that time, he had this curious sidelight where he was also a mentor and tutor for the OSU athletic department, where he got to work with Maurice on the book One and Done: How My Life Started When My Football Career Ended. Bob is an international educator, having run programs for OSU in China, Turkey, and Indonesia. He is also the director of the Center for American Culture, funded by the U.S. State Department, on the campus of Wuhan University. Bob has been a Fulbright Scholar in Belarus and Moldova, where he currently lives and teaches. Recently, he has been sent by Professors Without Borders to Uganda, Nigeria, and Turkey to lead short courses at universities there, but he still has strong ties to Columbus with a residence in the University District and his mother still living in Upper Arlington. And we're here also joined by former OSU star running back Maurice Clarett, who is originally from Youngstown and still has strong ties there, and he currently resides in Central Ohio. His oldest child recently graduated from Columbus School for Girls right here in Bexley, and his two young sons haven't started school yet. Maurice is both a traditional entrepreneur and a social entrepreneur. He and several partners are the owners of the largest group of podiatry practices in the state, and also owns several vascular centers throughout Ohio. He also founded the Red Zone, a social service agency which is the primary partner for counseling, social work, and therapeutic services for Youngstown City Schools. Maurice travels all over the country sharing his own mental health journey, which is ongoing. As a true freshman, he starred for 1 year as the Ohio State Buckeyes football running back, which was the magical 2002 season where the team went 14-0 and beat the Miami Hurricanes in a double overtime national championship thriller that is hailed as one of the best college football games of all time. One play from the game, known as the Strip, is perhaps the single greatest play in college football history and is a testament to his supreme athleticism as well as his cognitive approach to football. He is also the author of the book One and Done: How My Life Started When My Football Career Ended, which tracks Maurice's life from the south side of Youngstown to Columbus and Ohio State, and then to Toledo, Ohio Correctional Institute, where his journey to redemption began. Please join me in welcoming Bob Eckhart and Maurice Clarett.
Okay, thanks, Zach. And I don't know if you heard what Maurice said, but he looked at me in the middle of that and said, "Did you write that?" And of course I did. Of course I did. And I it was a great pleasure to write that. It was a great pleasure to write this book with Maurice. And all of these events that we get to do together are just a real joy for me. And so thanks, Zach, for being receptive to this idea, and thanks to all of you for coming. And thanks for Maurice, because I just send him a message. I'm like, "Hey, Maurice, do you want to do this thing at the Bexley Library?" And he says yes, which I appreciate, and I don't take for granted. So I appreciate that you're here. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I was thinking to myself, I said, man, I've been meaning to update a bio. And I said, Bob, just help me out. No, but Bob is, I don't know. People describe people a lot of ways as friends, but Bob has really been my friend for 21 years now, 22 years. And there's a lot of things I turn down publicly, stuff that I get paid for, stuff to be around the country, anything for, but Bob is so much of a friend that I don't care what he asks me to do. Just hit me up and Bob got me, and Bob has been instrumental in my life to just help me get where I'm at and all that good stuff. So Love me some Bob.
Okay, so I'll do a little bit of an intro. Maurice is going to read a little bit. We did, so the book came out 5 years ago, and okay, so I know some of you are actual authors. Where's our authors? Jim, okay, and some people are big OSU fans. You know, the Venn diagram of who we all are in this room today is, so we have authors, OSU fans, and Maurice fans. Okay, so that's great. That's why I wanted to do this event. But this was a project that we worked on from 2016 to 2019 for 3 years, and we kind of launched it on his 36th birthday in late October of 2019, and then we very promptly we did an event in. Well, he went on the Today Show. If you search like Maurice Clarett Today Show. He immediately went on the Today Show in New York. We went to Philly, and he introduced Ryan Day at a camp, and we talked about the book. And we went to D.C. He testified in front of a congressional subcommittee about collegiate athletics, and we just had a ton of momentum until the pandemic.
Yes.
And then the pandemic started, so we lost momentum with the book, but Maurice's momentum with the vascular centers and
Podiatry.
The podiatry bit. Yes, you want to explain that to them?
Yeah, and you actually helped me jog my memory. So the initial reason for doing the book was because we were supposed to put together actually a facility for people with mental health and addiction with people with mental health and addiction issues. And it was supposed to be centered around student athletes, but it was supposed to be like my life. It was supposed to be the catalyst of it. And so me and Bob met, for 2 or 3 years. We ended up getting the book done. We actually went out to D.C. and one of our former teammates, Anthony Gonzalez, he was a congressman at the time. And I remember I didn't even know what COVID was. He was making everybody stay away from each other. He was like, man, we got this thing, COVID, coming in. I was like, man, what's that? You know what I'm saying? And he was like, it's about to shut the whole world down. I didn't even believe him, to be honest with you. But by the time we had been done with that, we were done with that event, that basically stopped the momentum that we had basically built up for over 3 years. And it basically spent and turned everybody into different avenues and alleys. And at that time, I was still, and I still do it now, I was still running a social service agency. It's called the Red Zone, and we do mental health services for adolescents and adults, be it with mental health and addiction issues. And from there, at your Christmas party, that's why I say I owe Bob everything. At Bob's Christmas party, he introduced me to one friend, who introduced me to another friend, and we basically connected to build the largest group of podiatry practices and vascular centers in the state of Ohio. And so had I never went to Bob's Christmas party, and mind you, I don't even go to Christmas parties. So I go to Bob's Christmas party, I'm in the living room talking about God knows what. Bob makes an introduction. Again, if Bob doesn't make this introduction, I don't end up meeting my business partner. We don't end up building the business that we have now. So that's another reason why I say, Bob, whatever you kind of ask me for, like, I kind of feel responsible to do it, just as a level of like reciprocity and just being a good person towards him. But we got into podiatry, and I had a partner, or I still have a partner in LA. He's actually a podiatrist by trade. I separately, just to give you all the story, the background, if you ever wonder and ask how to end up in podiatry. So I randomly went to, and this is just my daughter. I tell you, my daughter went to Columbus School for Girls, and I wanted to go to vacation down in Florida. And she said, no, Daddy, let's go to California. Just randomly, let's go back out to LA. And so I had some friends in LA, and it was Passover, and they had everybody cleaning the whole house, and everybody was in the back, and we were just sitting on the balcony, and everybody started talking about all of these businesses that they were in. And they said, hey man, could you tell us how to build a treatment center? And I went on to talk about building a treatment center, and then the guy who was hearing me explain to somebody else how to build a treatment center, he basically came over to me and he said, hey man, I would like to, in some capacity, do business with you. He said, I'm a podiatrist, but I also have vascular centers, and if you basically will hear me out on an opportunity, basically, let's see if we can go in business in Ohio. And so he was the first piece to the business relationship that I'm in now. And then simultaneously, I went to a Christmas party, and his name is Mike Leach. Mike Leach, who basically had retired from Nationwide Insurance. He was a CFO for about 18 years. he ended up basically asking me about affordable housing. So I also invest in affordable housing. You know, I have a couple hundred units around Ohio, and he was asking me about it, and how did I get involved in the space, and what do I do? And I started explaining it to him, and then he randomly said, hey man, I know somebody who's interested in being in podiatry. And then me, I just understand people. Like, I'm real good at understanding how to connect people, or how things make sense, and just how to blur relationships. And lo and behold, we all came together, and from that conversation from Bob, I ended up basically being in this situation. So I owe a lot to Bob. So whether he knows it or not, I credit him for a lot. So anytime he asks me to come and speak or be involved in anything or do a favor, unless it's like some dire emergency that I have going on, I'll move everything around to make time for Bob.
So thank you for saying that. Thank you for being my friend. We have had a nice relationship for over 20 years, and in the bio, it mentions that I worked for the athletic department, and I did kind of. So there's all these really amazing high performance athletes that you see on television that you don't get to know really. And I had the chance to get to know a lot of them. And it was really very meaningful to me. I just happened to be a person at the university I was teaching in the English department, and I got on the radar of the athletic department, and then my phone started ringing, and I would pick up the phone, and this was in the old days. I'd say, hi, and they say, Bob, this is John. I say, hi, John. He'd say, well, Bob, we have a situation. And then there were several situations before Maurice.
Yeah.
And in fact, like I remember hearing about Maurice when he was in the state finals with Warren G. Harding, and I heard that he was coming to Ohio State, and that was probably in late November or December. Yeah. And I kind of knew that in a month or two, my phone would ring, and it would be about Maurice. And at the end of January, and I was kind of waiting, you know, we were on the quarter system. The quarters start the first week of January, and like the second week, I haven't heard anything. The third week, I haven't heard anything. The fourth week of a 10-week quarter, my phone rings, and you got to go over to the facility and meet this guy named Maurice Clarett. And so I don't know if you remember meeting me the first time, but I remember being in the hallway and seeing Maurice come around the corner with his advisor, and he's got a duffel bag, and you'd done surgery on your thumb,
yep.
So your thumb was all wrapped up,
yep.
And here he is coming, and I'm like, okay, we got 6 weeks to get him to pass all his classes, and so that's the way my life was at the time. And so I stayed with Maurice while he was still at Ohio State. And I was out I don't know, how many of you were out in Tempe in January of 2002 for the national championship game? I was there, and I didn't go there as a huge fan. I was raised in Columbus. My dad was a university kid, and one of his best friends is here, Ralph and Julie Nuskin, who've been my friends forever. University kids, went to University High School. My dad sold the Lantern on High Street, delivered the Lantern at Ohio State, but I wasn't raised as a fanatic because I think my dad knew the dark side of football. And I remember being at the Lane Avenue Shopping Center as a kid, and we met a guy. He introduced me to him, Dean Duggar. I don't remember his name. He was a lineman. And as we walked, I was probably no older than this young boy. And as we walked away, I was like, Dad, what was the matter with that? That guy wasn't quite right. And my dad said, oh, he's punch drunk. You know, he'd had too much head trauma, too many concussions. And so I think my dad just knew about the dark side of OSU football. That's just football in general, but also about OSU football. So I flew out to Arizona because I wasn't just working with Maurice, I was working with a lot of the guys, and it's very much detailed in the book, and probably you guys remembered if you're here. But there was an issue with Maurice and the athletic director in the few days right before the game, and I went out to the Scottsdale Princess, and I remember meeting with you. I remember talking to you at the swimming pool, and I remember what you told me. You were very frustrated, and you said, "I'm going to go out. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to try to win." But I'm not happy about how things went. And so then you know, things went a little bit south in the relationship with Andy Geiger. And then the real story is that when Maurice was incarcerated, we were pen pals. Mm-hmm. And he was just an incredible letter writer, and the turnaround on the things would be 48, 72 hours. Like I'd write a letter, I'd get a letter back in 72 hours, and I'd kind of have to wait a week. I'd try to wait a week or so because I just couldn't keep up. But I think we were talking about the book while you were in prison, and I still have this stack of letters somewhere in my house. I still have the stack of letters. Weren't people talking to you about doing a book while you were in prison?
Yeah, there was quite a few people who reached out.
Michael Vick.
Yeah, there was, I can just think about the millions of people, not millions, but you had quite a few people either wanting to do a documentary or do a story or do some sort of docu-series. But after living so much of this stuff personally, like it's just hard to give your life to somebody, you know, and when somebody writes something in stone, it's like it's your life, and whether it's all true or false, and whoever has control over the editing of it, that's what a kid ends up reading, and that's what everybody grows to think is the truth or think is, you know, fact. And I think just from being, I don't want to say done wrong, but just being mischaracterized so much in the media, I just knew there had to be somebody at like these pivotal moments, especially in college, because there was a lot of detail. And unless you spent time and wanted to extract all the detail, and you could name circumstance and you could put context around everything, like it wasn't going to make sense to you. And then just somebody who could just write something from a pure place. And I just remember during the formidable years, or the years that made me like known as Maurice Clarett to everybody, to the world, I probably spent the mass majority of that time around you. You know what I'm saying? Just the year and a half or so that I was on campus. And so just somebody who understood it, somebody who meant it, or somebody who was just, you know, there at that time and can describe what went on, that was important to me. But just wanting to have the story told from my perspective. You have to figure, right, there wasn't like podcasting, there wasn't like social media, there wasn't these sort of like mechanisms to where you could talk about your story. And so at that point, you know, you connecting with somebody and having them actually pen a story together and giving accurate descriptions of certain moments, and then even somebody having the time to do it, and somebody who wants to do it. I think there's a lot of stories that they end up getting rushed because people want to put them out too fast, instead of just, you know, taking time to make sure that the right people are in the right places to articulate your story, or they could tell what went on around that time. And so that was important to me. And I think also in prison I was maturing. And I was maturing around somebody who has seen me be a kid, but somebody who can accurately describe like the maturity process. So I don't know, unless you've been in the world of media and been done wrong by media and understand how everything comes to be, you really can't. You really can't have appreciation for people who can story write or have context of how your story should be told until you kind of go through the downside of that. I think that's a cleaner way of saying it.
Okay, so starting in 2016, when all of a sudden I did have more time on my hands, we would do conversations once a week. And there's a Columbus Public Library branch on Livingston.
Yeah.
And Maurice at the time had a social service agency, the Red Zone on Livingston. And my wife was doing a clinical internship at Nationwide, Livingston and Parsons. So I would drop her off, and then we'd go meet at the library on Tuesday mornings. And we did this once a week for 3 or 4 months, and I recorded all the conversations. And so really the book is, there are certainly some parts of it that are almost 100% straight out of his mouth the way it came out. And then there are other parts that are sort of heavily edited. But we did the conversations over the course of several months, and then I would then go to the downtown library, and I'd sit there and I'd transcribe them while I waited to pick up my wife. And over the course of 4 or 5 months, I had a 75,000 word transcript that was just nothing but him. And then over the course of the next 2 years, I turned the 75,000 word transcript into about a 100,000 word book. And trying to really capture his voice. And it really helped that, you know, there's parts in here where I can read the lines and I can remember, oh, I asked him that question, and then that's his answer to that question, and it just sort of appears like that. But that's the way the book was produced, and then he published the book. We didn't turn it over to anybody. You know, my mindset was, we got to find somebody to publish this book. His mindset was, we can publish, I can publish this book. I want to keep control of the book. And even once we decided to self-publish, the book's not on Amazon. The book, like if any of you tried to find the book, it's not very easy to get unless you sort of track down me or him. They have it at the library. Gramercy has had copies in the past. I don't know if they do now. One or two of the Barnes and Nobles has had it. But you know, if you've never published a book yourself, the way I remember it, you paid about $1,000 to have the layout. Yeah. Some local woman did the cover, and then you paid like a couple $1,000 for about 400 books that we used at a big launch party at the Schottenstein Chabad House in New Albany, and sold those books for 20 or 30 bucks. And then that obviously covered the cost, because a book only costs $2 or $3.
Oh, yeah, it was print. Yeah.
And you still got a few boxes of these in your garage, I think. And so we generated enough revenue at that first event to print 5,000. I think we
about 10,000.
Those are free and clear. And so you know, there's a bunch of books in the back. Yeah, we can sell them. We don't. Did you bring the chip reader?
No.
we don't really have the mechanism to sell them very well. If you have money or if you don't. Like, the point of the book isn't to sell the book.
Yeah.
The point of the book is that people read the book. The book is part of a project. The project is to save lives.
100%.
I didn't want to get that deep that quick. But there's 4 guys on his team, national championship team, that have passed. Shane.
Yep.
Kudla.
Mike Kudla. Will Smith.
Will.
And Ivan Douglas.
And I worked, Shane was another guy I was going to do a book with. And the last text in my phone from Shane was, how much money can we make on a book? And I'm trying to, like, I got to explain to Shane, like, that's not why we're doing it. Because I don't know if you know Shane's story, but he played for the Chargers, and he used to walk across the border with $15,000 in his pocket and come back with a duffel bag full of OxyContin. And he was addicted to pills. And then he got clean, and he graduated. He had an amazing story that really needs to get told. But he walked out into the desert, and he's gone. And so I don't know if that story, I'm still in touch with his brother doesn't know the story, and I didn't get the story. And Ivan Douglas was another guy I worked super closely with. He had heart problems. Yeah. Will Smith died in a shooting. He got shot in the street in New Orleans. Yeah. So, we are all very lucky that Maurice is alive. I feel very lucky that Maurice is alive. We should all be the world should feel lucky that Maurice is alive, because that's what the stakes are. The stakes are really, really high with a lot of these guys. And so the point is, you shouldn't have to go to prison to get mental health treatment, right? This is a mental health book. This is a lot of, I don't even know if we put autobiography, social work, criminology, education, sports, black studies, substance abuse. I also wrote those. It's a mental health book. This is a mental health story. This is the story. And so really the goal is to generate enough money through the Maurice Clarett Foundation to create a treatment facility so that you don't have to go to prison to get mental health. That's where Maurice got his mental health treatment. And the story's all in the book. I'll let him tell it too a little bit, but that's the journey, and that's the project. The book is part of a project, and the project is trying to reach people and generate understanding in the community so that all of you can understand what the stakes are with these guys that you see on Saturday afternoon. You know, they're your heroes when they're playing football, but they're real people just like us with real struggles. And so he has emerged from that. It's a story of redemption as well. But okay, so let's get to the reading part. And we've never done this. We've done a lot of events where he stands up and tells his story, but we've never done an actual reading where he reads. But there's 2 parts that I want him to read today. Cool. And
which are?
This is the first one. It's marked, and then it's like a page and a half. And so,
excuse me.
Another real deep and heavy thing that we believe that was one reason we worked so well together is that stories have the power to change lives. And if you take that all the way out, stories have the power to save lives. So somebody could read this book and it might give them inspiration. You should tell the Tyson story.
Oh, yeah.
Tell the Tyson story.
Okay. No, the Mike Tyson story was...
you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, you can't make it up.
This is his world.
Yeah, this is... so just to give context, this was the baby shower.
The day of your wife's baby shower.
Yeah, this is the day of her baby shower. And we're preparing to go to a baby shower in Worthington. And ironically, ESPN was in town, and they were doing a follow-up story to just a 30 for 30, just to see where I was at. I don't know.
Adam Rittenberg was here. He was doing the Athlete Whisperer follow-up.
Yes, correct. And so, lo and behold, my phone is blowing up. I'm preparing to come to the baby shower, and I think that they're just telling me to hurry up because I'm late.
Your brother-in-law is Mike Doss.
Yeah. So he's blowing me up. He's saying to come to the. He's blowing me up. I'm thinking
he's in an autograph signing session.
Yeah. Okay.
With Mike Tyson.
Yeah, now you see he's a storyteller, right? I miss all the details. So Mike Doss was at a. Let's set this down so I can focus. So Mike Doss and Jonathan Wells were at a autograph session with Mike Tyson and Pete Rose, God rest his soul.
In Dublin.
In Dublin, right? And so they were at a hotel doing an autograph signing, and Mike was supposed to be at the baby shower. So I thought Mike was blowing me up because he said I was late, but I was actually finishing up the story with Adam Rittenberg. And so as he keeps blowing me up, he starts to FaceTime me now. So I was like, okay, man, like, what do you want? And he was like, man, Mike Tyson is here, and he said he wants to meet you. And so just for context, the last time I seen Mike Tyson, now this is 2019. The last time I seen Mike Tyson was 2005, when me and Mike Tyson were in Los Angeles, and we went to a club called Excalibur. And Excalibur was a club after the club, and this club started like at 3 a.m., right? And so when you went in at 3 a.m., you had to come in with 10 people, and it was just like Nightmare on Elm Street, I like to say it lightly, right? And so when I was in this party, Mike Tyson, out of all people, came up to me, and he was like, hey, man, I'm looking for some cocaine. Could you find me some cocaine? And I was like, all right, like, if this is what you want me to do. So I spent like half my night going around trying to find Mike ecstasy and cocaine. And so I
had not heard this part of the story.
So I'm thinking to myself, like, this is my one interaction with Mike Tyson. I would remember that. And so I'm not thinking that Mike Tyson would remember that, like, all these years later. And so Mike Tyson was at this event, and Mike Tyson was describing to them, he says, hey, man, it was a dude here who I know. He couldn't name my name, but he named vaguely what I went through. And he said, do any of you all know him? Can I meet him? So at this point, I got Mike Doss on the phone telling me Mike Tyson wants to meet me. Mike Tyson gets on the phone, and I'm like, that is Mike Tyson, right? And he's like, yo, could you come here? And now I'm sitting here like, I'm late from my own baby shower, right? But it's like also Mike Tyson. Like, this is like a good excuse, right? So I ended up...
Meanwhile, I had gone home to shower, and I missed this whole part. I did not get to meet Mike Tyson.
So I ended up... I went to Hilliard to meet Mike Tyson, and when I get there, it was like, so when I get there, I first seen Pete Rose, and I was like, I know exactly who Pete Rose is, and so I was shocked that it was Pete Rose right here, and I said, this is Mike Tyson. And so Mike Tyson comes over, and he was like, man, I got to talk to you. And he said, man, I was in the middle of like, he was with women, and he said, I was getting ready to get high and drunk, and he said, I seen you on TV. And he said, I remember when I first seen you at this party, he said, you was a junkie like me. And he said, now, when I looked at you on TV, he said, man, if this dude can clean his life up, I know I can. And he said, you were who inspired me to get sober and clean my life up. And I was like, yo. And so just imagine me, right? And so.
This will be in the next book.
Yeah, so it was nuts. And so at this time, this is like even crazier. So then he started breaking down crying. And so I'm like, yo, like, so like, it was just, so mind you, this is Mike Tyson, this is Ezekiel Elliott's father, this is Pete Rose, this is me, this is Mike Doss, and this is, we have another friend. His daughter graduated from Old Intention today, Chafin Rankin. So, and Chase sitting there. And as this is happening, I'm like, yo, this is kind of like surreal, that like somebody who's considered my hero and somebody I looked up to is sitting here crying to me and talking about this. He was like, man, your life was really messed up. So he's going describing to me how crazy my life was and how he had watched it from afar. And I'm like, man, I didn't even know Mike Tyson was even remotely interested in my life, right? And he just talked about how it inspired him and like just what that moment did for him. And he wanted to say it to my face that basically you inspired me to basically become a better person. And so I was like, man, like, you know, just the old story, like you never know who's watching you or you never know who you can inspire. And so I'm like to me, I was like, man, if I don't inspire nobody else, like I'm done, right? Like I was like, everybody else, man, like I'm cool. Like if this is like my only thing I got to do in life to encourage Mike Tyson. But that was the Mike Tyson story. And he just talked about how it had an impact on his life and how it just basically made him clean his life up and eventually get sober. He was like, I quit doing cocaine and drugs, and you know, still he doesn't consider marijuana a drug that basically he abused. So he quit doing alcohol and cocaine and all the other miscellaneous drugs. But he said that, you know, I helped to inspire him to basically get back on the right track. But as fate would have it, Adam Rittenberger was in the actual facility, and I said, Adam, you can't make this stuff up. So it's not like I have to tell you a story, like you actually lived it with me. And he was able to accurately write it and describe it. So
this is really the kind of way Maurice's life goes. And I've had kind of a passenger seat view of this for 20-some years, and it's inspiring to me, and I think it can be inspiring to other people. But you know, I've had the real privilege to know him and to travel with him, and we walk through airports. And young people come up to him who weren't even alive when he was playing, and they want to take his picture. And I always grab the camera. When I give the camera back, I ask him, I was like, do you know who this is? And sometimes they say no. They say no, but I said, I saw him, I knew he was somebody, and I snuck a picture and I sent it to my dad or I sent it to my uncle, and they said, that's Maurice Clarett, you've got to get a picture. And so I'm very familiar with that. I think I have one of my best friends, his son, out in Denver right now. He was I go to Denver to see my friend from law school, Dan Cho. His son's 13 years old, and his son has seen Youngstown boys 30 times. 13-year-old kid out in Colorado. And so it's really impossible to predict who your life can touch, but really who's Maurice's life can touch as well. So go ahead. No,
I'll just like to build onto that, just like, and we've never done this, but I'll just, whatever comes up to my mind, I think I'll say that may be relevant. I don't know, but I have like more life fans. Like I don't really have football fans. Like people who, like, if you're a diehard OSU fan and you love OSU football and you're living during that moment, when we won the championship, that was like very nostalgic to people, right? Like you had to be here. That was a place and time. But the vast majority of the people who I have are like life fans, and they've like experienced some struggle. They've had a family member experience a struggle. They've had somebody go through something, and like that becomes like the common denominator for people. So when people see me, they either like deeply love me in some regard, and they like look at me like a family member. And especially like in the Columbus community, a lot of people see me grow up. You know, you come here at 18. And I'm 41 now, so people kind of see you like you grow up. Like other people get a chance to grow up in private, or they go to school somewhere, or they make their mistakes in private and they don't have to deal with it publicly. But for hate it or love it, you know, I've been here for 20 years, or I've been in the Columbus community in Ohio my whole life. So people feel like they know me to some regard. So it's different. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. But I would say this: I like having more life friends than people who like me for football. Football is like, it's entertaining, but when somebody's seen that you've overcome something in life, it just has a different, like it resonates differently. Like the relationship is different. I don't really have like a bunch of like frivolous conversations. Like people are typically coming to me saying, hey, my kid's on drugs, or could you help to inspire somebody that they love, or somebody's in a crisis situation. Like I get like serious conversations. Like I I don't get to like, hey man, what were you thinking during this play? Like I wouldn't want to talk about that. Like,
But that's in the book. If you're interested in that, that's in the book. I had to balance enough football to appease the football fans, but not too much football to alienate to people who don't understand football at all. I mean, I've got students all over the world who've never watched an American football game who've read this book, and I want them to appreciate his cognitive approach to football. Like I wrote that line about the strip and how important it was that, like when you read about that play in here, that wasn't just a physical play, that was a mental play. Like he saw something that I wouldn't see, that probably none of us or even trained football players would see. And so it was a cognitive thing. But what he started to say kind of refers to the subtitle. Let me explain real quick. How my life started when my football career ended. And if you've watched the Youngstown Boys, they interview the judge. And we have a quote from the judge, Shira Scheindlin. And in that in Youngstown Boys, the judge says, I felt so bad when my ruling got overturned because I knew his life was over. And like, okay, we know the judge now and she's cool, but like that was not a cool thing to think or say, because his life was not over when he couldn't go to the NFL. And so I was watching that right at the tail end. So I work on this book. We do the interviews for 6 months. I spend a couple years editing it off and on and reading other books. And we don't have a title. We don't have a subtitle. We don't really have anything. But all that kind of came together right at the end. I rewatched Youngstown Boys and I saw that quote from her. And when we went to New York for the Today Show, we went to her law office. So she's not a federal court judge anymore. She's a partner in a big New York City law firm. And we went there and they had a thing like this. And we did an event with her law firm. And I didn't mention that to her, just kind of how unsettling it was for her to have thought that his life would be over if he couldn't carry a football. And that gets talked about in the book too. That like the least important or valuable thing that he has ever done is carry a football for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, it's also kind of interesting and cool that he did it, but it's not like what he's doing now with the social service agencies and everything he's doing to inspire people. But okay, so let's get back. It's page 215. And let me set it up. So we believe that we believe in the power of stories. We believe that reading saves lives. And this is a passage where he's describing really the first book that he read. Before he went to the Toledo, Ohio Correctional Institute, he was in the county center.
Franklin County Jail.
And somebody handed him a book. And I tried to he was going to bring the book. We all forgot the book. They don't have the book upstairs. It's a tiny little book called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. Yeah, raise your hand if you've read it. Yeah, he's read it 40 or 50 times. Yeah. So somebody hands it. He's never read. And this should really resonate with the autobiography of Malcolm X, if you've read that. Because that's what this book is patterned on. Loosely. The same story. A literacy conversion. Conversion through literacy and education. Okay.
Cool. Excuse me. In the county jail, that was the first time that I actually read. The first book that I got was As a Man Thinketh. I was reading it and trying to get my mind going in the right direction. There was a gentleman at the county jail who was being processed out after a long sentence in federal prison. I don't even know his last name, but his first name was Adam. He had gone to federal prison, and he had basically dropped the book off with an officer he gave to me. Excuse me. Excuse me. He wanted me to have it because he thought I would benefit from it, and I started my sentence in a new chapter of my life.
You can grab a copy of the book if you want to read along. Page 216.
This was the first book that I had read, probably in my adult life 100%. When the guard handed me the book, I would have read anything. At that point, I would have read the dictionary. I could read the words, but to comprehend, digest, and understand the context, that level of understanding just wasn't there for me. That book was written around 1900, so the language was very simple and straightforward to the point that a kid could read it and absolutely understand it. In fact, I think I will always remember that line in the book, until thought is linked with purpose, nothing intelligent shall ever happen. To cognitively think of the linkage of the thought having purpose, it was like, I don't want to cuss. It was like, oh shit, I didn't know a thought like that. I didn't know a thought could have purpose. This one line absolutely changed how I was starting to think about my life. I wanted to orient myself around my thoughts. I wanted to orient myself so all of my thoughts were aligned with the purpose getting clean, going straight, becoming a partner to Ashley and a father to Jaden. This is what I wanted, and I knew I needed to do. I would describe it like this. Reading felt like I was working out part of my body that hadn't been worked out before. You're reading this shit and your mind is starting to fire, and you're starting like there's something else up there other than me wanting to play football. The only things that I had been thinking about before the street life or football were how to rob, how to break a tackle, those sort of things. I'm stumbling and bumbling, my fault. And now I'm trying to understand fundamental aspects of human consciousness. There's a primitive level from operating in an inner city environment. Very animalistic, nothing deep or thought-provoking. It's just survival on a daily basis, and that didn't take the same level of intelligence. Even football, which I put a ton of brain power into, watching film and studying defenses and learning blocking scheme, was never in the context of life or decision-making or figuring out what the hell I want or what I had or didn't have, or my thoughts were about future out. You're stumbling over it. Excuse me with this. I was never thinking about those things. I was never thinking about things of that nature, big things. So now I was reading books and thinking heavy thoughts, and this was a side of me coming from the inside of my mind that was pretty cool to experience. Also around this time, I got a dictionary from the guard. They had a cart with miscellaneous books that I had rolled through, and the dictionary was there, so I grabbed it. It was just one of the coolest shit. It was just the coolest shit to me reading. Part of this wants me to read it the way I read it. Then I'm like, I see where Bob's edits came in handy so people can actually digest it. Because this is me talking, so I'm like, I know how I want to say it, Bob. Thank God for Bob's editorial skills. If it was me, it would probably be a lot of F-bombs and everything else, but I'll clean it up and make it.
There were 377 F-bombs in this book. I took out all but 3 of them, and you'll have to read. They were essential to the narrative. That's a true story. And I thought I took out all the S words, but I didn't.
I felt bad at the kills.
I know.
I felt bad. I was like,
I crossed those out. That's why I handed him that book with that crossed out.
Yeah, so...
I remember reading As a Man Thinketh.
Yeah, I remember reading As a Man Thinketh over and over again. I think through the process of formally reading, in the beginning, you're just reading words and not digesting them. But the more I read it, the more I could digest it and different things off the page. I would venture to say I probably read that book, and I'm comfortable saying this. I read it over 40 times, probably over 50 now, between the county jail and in reception. I was literally reading it religiously. I was taking notes, making notes. It was exciting. In fact, it was the only book that I had before I went to prison in Toledo. So it was the only book I had in Franklin County in the reception, and I literally had nothing else to do all day but read and digest that book.
Okay, so that
was a struggle.
Yeah, I didn't warn him about any of that. That's my fault. But okay, so after you read that book, just talk about the books. And he's still a voracious reader.
Yeah, no, so you'll see I'll probably say it a lot more cleaner than me reading it. So, obviously I got the book from a gentleman named Adam, and I just remember being, initially when I was in the county jail, I would get all of these stacks of letters from people talking about what you meant to them and what you meant to the University of Ohio State, and like all of these moments and times that you basically share with people, with you being the football player and them being a spectator of some sort. And it was like replaying a part of my life that just basically kept me in the same cycle. But when I got As a Man Thinketh, it was the first time that I had read something that just kind of like ignited, I don't know if this emotion, feeling, these thoughts that just basically just sent me into this like space of like, man, this is the path to growth. And there was nothing ever before academically that I basically took serious. Everything with academics was always like, get eligible to play football. There was nothing like motivating for me to want to develop myself. And so what eventually happened was that took me to prison, and I met another gentleman in prison by the name of Mr. Calicante. Mr. Conte was actually the warden of the prison, and I think like once your mind kind of gets into a space of energy and consciousness, I think the universe kind of like corrals and puts the appropriate things around you. And I think like for the first 7 months of being locked up for 23 hours out a day, I think like somewhere in my spirit or my consciousness, I just had like elevated to a new level. And I wasn't thinking about, wanting to play football or criminal activity or just the nonsense of life. That's how I basically describe it. And I think the universe and God actually brought Keller Conte into my life. And Mr. Conte was actually, like I said, the warden of the prison, but his father was the chief of Sierra Leone for about 15 years. And I remember he had said a lot, but like it was just like these small things that made sense to me. He was like, Maurice, in Africa, if somebody gets in trouble, we basically bring them closer to the village, figure out what's going wrong, fix it, and then we send them back out. He was like, in America, when you all get in trouble, basically people throw y'all away. And he was like, I don't want you to basically be thrown away here. And so for the first, 13, 14, 15 months, the first part of my day, I would start going to the education wing. And a lot of people have misconceptions on what prison are. In prison, they have like educational wings and personal development wings where people go to different social service classes. And so from there, that's when I started going to responsible adult culture, thinking for a change, drug and alcohol courses around anger management, courses around dealing with interpersonal skills, coursework through cognitive behavioral therapy. And at this point, I had never heard of this stuff before. But you pair the first part of that experience with going back to the housing unit, and I was in a closed security facility, CLOSE, which means that you're basically locked up inside of the housing unit all day, the actual prison. And for the most part, you had nothing to do other than, exercise, go out into the day room and play cards and chess and, crack jokes and socialize with other inmates, or you could basically sit inside and you could read books. And so it was a catalog called Bargain Books, and I always attribute Bargain Books and As a Man Thinketh with the foundational pieces of basically turning my life around. And I went to Bargain Books. In Bargain Books, I just got attracted to just anything that was personal development related. And so anything that had to do with, either having a better level of consciousness, thinking positively, overcoming adversity, or anything that just sort of cleaned up behavior, stuff that wasn't academia related per se, where you were actually going through like an English course or a math course or just one of those verticals to get an education. This was all stuff I was like, man, this teaches me how to think. Like I didn't even know thinking was a thing. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who don't think thinking is an actual skill, but I felt like this was helping me to like manage my emotion, just my outlook on life in general had changed. And so it was just like the books that were basically feeding me. And then I felt like once I became a better person, or once I felt better about myself, or once I just could think clearly or just understand how to think, at that point I said, man, I can actually go do anything. It gave me the confidence to say, hey man, I can go be a businessman, I can go be an entrepreneur, I can go be, whatever it was that I basically wanted to accomplish. And I keep on saying it was as a man thinketh. And it was like basically what you think is what you create, the words you speak, the behavior you utter, or the behavior you repeatedly do over time. You basically create your world. And I think like people think that there's a lot of luck involved in life, and there's really not. And until you go through the process of understanding how life is created, just from the power of thought and word and everything else, and you do it repeatedly over time, you start to realize you create everything for yourself. And if it wasn't for that book, and I think like the book is like just this magical spell, like this just magical source of information. And that's what really happened to me.
What was that one quote? Until the thought is linked with.
Oh, until thought is linked with purpose, nothing intelligent shall ever happen. And I used to just think, like a lot of people think that there's a bunch of thoughts and words and events that happen just randomly. But it's actually not. It's actually you thinking everything into existence, whether you think negatively, whether you think lowly, whether you think positively, whatever you repeatedly do or whatever repeatedly you put into the universe, that thing is attracted to you. But that's what taught me. But I'll tell you this, it gave me context for how I got to where I was at too. So in my mind, you all wouldn't know it, but like, I'm pretty sure you'll watch the game this week, right? Or if you watch anything of college football this week, and you'll see a bunch of kids and they'll be running around and they'll be jumping around, they'll be getting excited and hype. There's a lot of kids who come from just various environments and they really believe that they're gangsters playing football, because I thought that I was a gangster from Youngstown playing football. And no matter what uniform I had on, no matter if it was the Denver Broncos, Ohio State, Warren Harding High School, the story that I thought to myself and believed to myself that I was this kid like going to play football. And so all the music that the people play, like I really thought that that's who I was. And what was the original question you asked? Because I was going to make a point.
The quote from the book, until the thought.
Oh, until thought was linked with purpose. I thought I was going to say something else, but that's essentially what I thought of myself. You know what I mean? But I actually created that world that when football was over, I still thought like a gangster. That makes sense? it was still the same kid. You know, you just took football away. Football masked and football helped. And so sometimes I wonder, like, why do these kids go crazy? Well, they actually been crazy. Football just masked it. You know what I'm saying? Like, crazy just doesn't pop out. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes, like, there's a lot of people who are very successful with their bad people, but people will tolerate them just as long as they're successful. You know what I'm talking about? We all know those people. Right? They're everywhere. You know, they're in the society we live in right now, but as long as you have a successful thing that commercially benefits others, people tolerate you. But it's not until that, you know, the talent or the gift that you give everybody is like no longer in place, and people can start to see who you are, you know, then you say, this guy isn't so much good. Like, I wouldn't let this guy advise my kids in that condition. You know, I wouldn't be, like, typically, you could probably, really, that's probably like the barometer on how you measure people. Like, the person who you're looking at, like, would I let this person advise my kid? Like, probably not. You know what I'm saying? That's like, you know, a great barometer on how you can judge people. So, but that's basically how I got to prison. And me learning and reflecting, the books end up giving me the tools to reflect, to understand how I got in the situation I was in. But I don't think you can grow until you're honest with yourself as to why you're at where you're at. And that's what basically happened.
Okay, and you know, that's the last third of the book, are the courses he took in prison and how he turned his prison years really into college. You know, yeah. That was 4 years, and he had a curriculum. There was a program called Thinking for a Change. It was designed by psychologists, and he participated in it for a year or two, and then you were a facilitator for it as well. So he was really getting into the social service space while he was in prison. And that's a really unusual part of the book, is that it's quite a feel-good prison narrative. And I don't know how I feel about that, but it's true. This is his story, like his story, meaning that, like, when they do the movie, Kelikante, this guy from the Sierra Leone background, like, you know, that, you know, 30 years ago, that would have been Morgan Freeman. I don't know who that would be now, but like, these should be scenes. Like, when he was just reading that part, I was really kind of imagining someone pushing a cart full of books through a hallway and then kind of handing him the dictionary or handing him a book off of a cart. And that's what I was trying to do, was really make this a list of scenes, because that's the way he described it to me. That's the way our conversations went. Okay, so Zach, how much time do we have? Okay. So the way I sold this to Zach was, let's do this for Michigan Week, because there's a really important part of the book here where he's coming from Youngstown and he doesn't have any idea what it meant, like the Ohio State Michigan rivalry. And he really already played the whole season, and he still didn't, like, you know, if you've got little kids in the backyard playing and they want to be Maurice Clarett or Chris Gamble and they want to beat Michigan, like, they're growing up with it, but he didn't grow up with it. So there's this really great part, it's page 116. And so this is just a few pages about his thoughts leading up to the Michigan game.
Okay, cool. Oh, here we go. Game 13. I think I know what this is. So game 13.
And I want him to read it so that when you read the book yourself, you hear his voice. Like, that's a really important thing. I've read this book 20 or 30 times, and when I read it, I don't hear my voice, I hear his voice, and it's just so compelling to hear his voice. So that's why I want him to read it.
I'm going to do it.
Because I would love to read it, but he should read it.
There we go. All right, game 13, Michigan, November 23rd. I didn't even dress the next game for Illinois because we went to overtime and we won 23-16. We certainly didn't think it would be that tough. It was freezing cold in Illinois, and they took us all the way to the limit. Our offense wasn't getting it done, and I was frustrated that I couldn't play, but I'm an optimistic person on all levels, and I just knew we would win. Let me put it this way. If I walked into any bad environment, any bad neighborhood, and if someone told me that I would live in this neighborhood, in my mind, I would figure out how to take over the neighborhood or make the neighborhood work for me. I don't look at the bad side of life sometimes. I still get, Bob crossed out the word. Okay.
I don't look, okay.
Okay. So I was wondering about, Bob made some personal edits because he knew he was being considered a young people. So, okay. I don't look at the bad side of things. I'll say that, right? Sometimes I still get depressed and I beat myself up, but usually when I'm on the right side, I'm an optimistic person. We were 12-0 at this point, and with only one game left against Michigan, this was the game everyone had been looking forward to all season. At first, the outlook on the season was, let's just get out there with this freshman running back and this tough defense and see what we could do for the season. We started at number 13 in the polls, and we were good, but not that promising. Then when we got into the conference play and further got into the season, we started to think, we could go for a real ball. We can go to a real ball. And the further we kept winning, it was like we could really, and the further we kept winning, it was like we could really make something happen and do something. So I was just thinking I had to get my shoulder together. I was a 19-year-old kid who basically in the last year had played 13 high school games as a senior, some of them while banged up. Then I got to Ohio State early. I had surgery on my thumb, did conditioning, played spring ball. Then I went through the summer conditioning, which was hell. And because I got there first, and when I leave, man, I just want to say this one. I want to say this the way I was talking. So let me start over. Then I got to Ohio State early, had surgery on my thumb, did summer conditioning, played spring ball, played spring ball, and then when I went through the summer conditioning, which was hell, because I had to get there first and to be the last one to leave after everyone worked out. Then we did camp in August. I got my ass beat up on scout team trying to get a starting spot. Then I was playing the entire season, starting as a freshman, had knee surgery during the season, and was dealing with serious shoulder injuries that nobody could explain to me. So right around this last week, after the shoulder injury, I started taking things more serious. I had cut out partying after the games a few weeks earlier, and I was really thinking hard about my future. When my shoulder got hurt, I got serious and I started really to handle my business. We had lost a lot of close calls when I wasn't playing much against Penn State, Purdue, Illinois, which might have got my teammates thinking, I wish we had Reese because he was one of the guys who barely got it done, or who really got it done. During the Michigan week, outside of the facility, I didn't hang with any of the guys on the team. I was at the senior tackle, but I wasn't the one into the whole rivalry thing. It wasn't a big deal to me. I didn't know anything about it. I hadn't grown up on it. I wasn't even watching it on TV. My shoulder was still strengthening, and it was all ice, stimulation, rest, ice, stimulation, rest. I was telling myself all I needed was rest. As I neared the end of the season, I was just thinking my body hurts, but there was no way I wasn't going to play against Michigan, just no way. I had been training the last 4 years for this, and if there was, I had been training the last 4 years for this, and if there was one thing that was going to be Michigan, I knew I had to be out there to get the help to get it done. I was focused during the Michigan week. I wasn't doing contact in practice, but I knew the game was a big deal for the town, and I had to be ready mentally, even if I wasn't there 100% physically. At this point, everything had blown over for me from the one and done article, and it was very clear that if we won, we would go on to the national championship, and the significance of this starting to sink in. We have been number two in the nation the last 2 weeks, and everybody wanted to play for the national championship. At first, I didn't differentiate much between bowl games, but as the season went on, I heard the other guys talking, and I learned a lot more about how the college football system worked, and I knew that if we wanted to go to a BCS national championship, that this was the biggest stage to play on. So all during the Michigan week, I was watching film, using lots of ice, stimulation. I wanted to win so bad. Let me frame this up. I just love to dominate big moments. I don't get caught up in the significance of what teams are playing, but I place a lot of emphasis on big moments and championships. I could have a citywide bridge tournament here, and I don't care, and I don't usually
give a damn.
Give a damn about bridge, but I would want to win just because it was big and I wanted to win. I'm a huge competitor, and I just always wanted to seize every moment. I wanted to own this moment on the big stage against Michigan, and this became a big deal to me, to the point that one night after practice in the middle of the week, on my way back to the condo, I went over to Gahanna school track in Gahanna and jumped the fence and ran sprints, so I knew I was training every chance I had before the game, and I knew in my heart those dudes from Michigan weren't out working with me. That is a true story. I remember doing it like it was yesterday. The irony is that this morning I was actually, I'm gonna just put a plug right here, but I plan on going to the team and telling them about this week. I remember, like it was yesterday, going over to the track and going to run sprints, because I said at some point in the game, and just in football in general, at some point everybody wants to give up, whether y'all know it or not, everybody. And so at some point, everybody, like a moment happens where people like concede defeat, right? If you watch the game this week, it was when Caleb Downs had the punt return. I remember that. So at some point, everybody's spirit gets broke, but the person who's inflicting their will on somebody, they need 1,000 reasons to keep on fighting. So I said, I'm going to go out here this week and I'm going to run in the dead cold just to have one more thing to hold on to, even though I was beat up. That makes sense, everybody? So that's it. So I like to beat the spirit out of people, but this is like, as I read this, like I'm humble, but like you'll see touches of arrogance and humble and competitor in me all the time, depending on what you catch me talking about. But this is 100% me. But I feel like I'm the spirit of Ohio. Like I represent Ohio good, because like different story, but I do. Y'all get where I'm coming from. But I'll tell you what really did it for me before. I remember this one. But I'll tell you what really did it for me before the Michigan game, and this was a serious stuff, and this went through my head during the game. For whatever reason, and if it was Coach Tressel did it on purpose, he's smarter than people think he is. But me and C. Grant roomed together the night before the Michigan game. I had never roomed with him before because I'd always roomed with running backs, but before the Michigan game, they put me with C. Grant, and to this day, I'm not sure why. C's still a great friend of mine. After dinner, when we were back in the room before going to bed, he was describing to me what the Michigan game had meant to him. I was sitting on the chair with my feet up, and at the end of the bed, he was sitting there on the other side of the bed where the telephone was, and just describing to me what his 4 years at OSU and his whole life story. He was saying, I remember playing at Iowa and Purdue, and I remember this, and I remember that, and I'm not kidding, but my man C must have told me about every game he played since Pee Wee football. And if you know C. Grant, he can talk, right? That man, I still love him. You're a really big part of that, and you've really given us the chance to win. I always knew what I brought to the team, but to hear from him, this senior who was killing me during the camp, just killing me by tackling me into the fence, and he was now saying that he depended on me. This brother needed me, and he depended on me. It was like a switch flipped on in my head, and I'd always lived in my own world, even to this day. But on that day, I got into C's world, and it just struck me that he wasn't the only one who needed me. The entire team needed me, and I needed to go out there and help the team win the game. So no. So this is my fault. So one, I can see where all Bob's edits are at, and I can see where. Oh man, thank you for doing this, right?
It's not clear to me that he's ever read it. In fact, when I finished it, I handed it to him, and he's like, "What?" I said, "You got to read it." I said, "Your name's going to be on it." He's like, "I'm not reading it," and I was like, "No, you have to read it." And he told me that he read it, but I should have known better.
No, but for the pleasure of the person who's really reading, I can see why. But I just wanted to get to where it's two moments here I wanted to explain. The moment where this was Michigan week, and I said, I want to make sure that I have something to pull on when it's time to fight these dudes, right? And I said, man, let me go ahead and when it was cold, and I went to Gahanna Middle School, and it was like, because it gets dark early, and I'm just running these sprints. And I just said, man, on Saturday, this is going to work. And I said, because ain't nobody doing this stuff. And I just wanted to have like a mental edge of something that I was doing that nobody else wasn't doing. And I just remember my high school coach used to say, all the time, he was like, man, Maurice, he's like, the road to where you want to be is always above and beyond. He's like, it's the extra mile. And he was like, that's what you basically need to pull from when you're competing with anybody. He said, because everybody can do what's normal, but he's like, it's the extra mile stuff. And I just remember this was like an extra mile moment. But C. Grant, and the entire season, when I came in as a freshman, when I came in as a freshman, there was a bunch of older guys who had made names for themselves, and they were notable and famous and all this other stuff. And so as I had success through the season, none of these guys would come and tell me what I meant to them, right? And it was just like, he's the freshman who's running, who's playing, who's getting all the attention. But we never really had like a significant moment, or not a significant moment, an intimate moment where somebody can tell you like, hey, you mean something to me, right? And so I felt like C. Grant was telling me these stories the night before the game. We sitting there, and he went from Purdue to Iowa to him partying to, it was like a lot, right? But the most significant part was he was like, man, there's a lot of people depending on you tomorrow to basically play and to be healthy and to be productive. And all he had to do was tell me like, yo, we need you. And I don't know what did it in that moment. But I guess that's a human emotion when you feel needed. When somebody needs you to come through for them and you know that you have the ability to. I'm just a gamer. Like, I don't know if you ever said it any other way. Like, I'm just like, you can count on me, right? And so that was it. And I believe the spirit in the game that we played and the confidence that it came from C. Grant. And literally to this day, C is still one of my like closest friends. But it was that moment of like, hey, I need you, we need each other. Like it started from there. And so that was me describing that moment to Bob. And I thought about both of those moments today. And obviously, I plan on sharing them with the team this week.
And that's just such another powerful scene that when we're sitting there and I'm just kind of asking him questions to scroll through the season, and then he starts telling me about being in a hotel room, and there was a line in there where he says, I was sitting on the edge, I was sitting in the chair with my feet up on the edge, because I had asked him, like, just where were you sitting? Like, what set the scene for me, so that if we need to shoot this as a movie, we can try to do that. And so that's one of the moments where you can see where he's kind of answering a question that I was asking him. So the book really is just a series of conversations. That's all it is. It's just like, when I read it, I can remember talking to him in the library, and probably he can remember it the same way, but that's just as pure and honest of an effort as you can ever have in your life, is just to sit there and have a conversation with somebody that you know is going to turn into an artifact. And I'll close with two stories. The first one is that, neither of us has taken any money from this book. And that was really important to me. And we didn't talk about that until the very end when I was handing it to him and saying, you need to read it. I think you said to me, like, I want to pay you or something. And I was like, no, I've been avoiding that. We hadn't talked about it for years. We hadn't talked about what any sort of arrangement was going to be. But it was very clear in my mind that this was not volunteer work, but vocational work, that this was just something in my life's purpose that I needed to do was tell this story. So that's the first part. The second part is, okay, so I already told you, we paid the woman to design the book. We sent the PDF to a guy in Pennsylvania who printed it.
New York, yeah, Richard.
Rich, and he sent me a couple copies. So he sends me 2 copies of the book. I get them in a FedEx envelope. And I let Maurice know they were there. Maurice comes, Ashley's in the front seat. He pulls up in front of my house. Maurice gets out of the car, and he comes over to me, and I put the book in his hand, and it was just such an incredibly, I don't know if you remember that moment. I remember that moment like it was yesterday. And you said something like, I could die tomorrow, it would be okay. My story will be told.
Yeah.
Like, this is his story. But, okay, so third story. This isn't just his story. This isn't just the story of Maurice Clarett. This is the story of hundreds or thousands of young men just like him who get pulled out of neighborhoods like he did and brought to Ohio State and the SEC schools, and they get used to play football, and when the university's done with them, they kick them to the curb, which is what happened. That's the bottom line of what happened. So, and so this relates to, so I was an English teacher, and I kind of have a background in studying autobiography. So I've read a lot of autobiographies. And when I was writing this book, I read another 15 or 20 or more autobiographies, mainly of professional athletes, and almost all of them were ghost-written or however co-written you want to describe the relationship. And they were on a spectrum where some of them were incredibly polished. And then there was one I read, there's several with Mike Tyson, but one of his is really not doing Mike Tyson justice. The Mike Tyson that I feel like I know from Maurice is a thoughtful guy, a thoughtful and intelligent, smart guy. But the book that the co-writer wrote was like boxing, drugs, prostitutes, boxing, drugs, prostitutes, boxing, drugs. It didn't do him any justice. So it's not an easy thing to write somebody else's life story. That's a big responsibility. And there was the moment, I think it was probably after reading the Tyson book, where I did the like find replace for the F word and came up with 377 instances of it. And I went through and I took out every one of them except for those 3 that were necessary for the narrative. So these are all important considerations, because I needed to write a book that represented him and reflected his life, and not just his life, the life of all those other people whose stories don't get told. The stories, the people who weren't Maurice Clarett, who didn't get to play for the national championship, who didn't do the strip, who didn't get the redemption that he's having now. And you should close with that, like what you're doing now and your involvement with the team, and then we'll take some questions. But I just really see Maurice's life as both absolutely extraordinarily unique, but at the same time representative. So when I was studying autobiography in academia, I think this is something that Maya Angelou talked about, was that like her books, you know, she has 5 or 6 of them. They're all bound nicely if you want to read them. But starting with I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is not a book about how unique and special Maya Angelou is, but how absolutely representative she is of things that happened to thousands or tens of thousands of young black girls. And so that's the challenge that you have when you're writing a book like this. But it was great to have a partner who gave me all of that freedom for a couple years, and then when I turned it over to him, was willing to not read it because he trusted me. I think he trusted me because our intentions were pure.
Yes.
And we had a project, and we weren't trying to make money and sell books. But that's the story of this effort and this collaboration.
Yeah, no. This even being up here, the original vision, if you remember, was to get out on the road and go and do more stuff like this. And I can triple down on it and say it now. I probably make more money than I've ever made in my life now, but there's nothing like this work that probably makes me feel more fulfilled. And I used to think that was a joke when people said it before, when you make money. I thought money was like the end all be all to everything. But even more now, having more of now, this makes me want to, since it kind of got stopped and stifled by COVID, figure out how do you restart the engine to get out here and to connect with people and talk about the purpose of the book, the meaning of the book, and just the amount of people who I've come across who've actually needed life help, right? Whether it's navigating, just navigating life's help, because I've been there, I've been inside that moment. I'm pretty sure I had to mention it to you when I was in my mother's kitchen. I remember being done at Ohio State, and I was like, man, I just wish there was somebody who can help me figure this part of my life out. Like, I didn't need an academic institution. I didn't need an athletic institution. I needed like a life and mental health institution. But in 2004 or 5, whatever that was, I didn't know what it was called. But I absolutely know how that feeling feels to be in that scenario where you need life help, right? And so, like, the spirit of that was this, right? And even producing books and buying more than what you needed. I've been at events and given away more books than we sold. Just to have the story in people's hands, and for them to have it, you read it, maybe you give it to somebody who's an institution, maybe you give it to somebody who's down and low. And even if you don't take everything, it may be like 4 or 5 pages that make sense to you, that sparks a thought inside your brain to say, okay, this helps me and assists me. And so that's really the purpose of it. And that's that, right? But into what I do now, I'll just name some of the stuff that I do with athletics. One, Coach Day is a huge proponent for mental health assistance and help and development. And for the past, and I'll bridge these 2 stories, but for the past 5 years, I've been going to, around COVID, I started going to UConn men's basketball team. In UConn men's basketball with Coach Danny Hurley, there was a kid on the team who had needed help, and his story was very similar to mine. But the kid had got caught with a gun. He was a potential first-round draft pick. And when he got caught with a gun and got caught drinking and driving, the coach was like, man, let me bring somebody in here who had a similar situation with a lot of potential, who basically messed their lives up. And so when I went to Danny Hurley and I started talking to the kid, he said, Maurice, I don't want you to sound polished and educated and smooth. He said, I need you to sound like the person before the edits. You know what I'm saying? And he said, man, come and talk to my basketball team just raw and in person. And I talked to him one time, and then from that, he said, hey, look, I'm going to disregard all these other guys who come in. And he said, can you just start to come on a monthly basis and just be yourself and spend time with the kids? And so I knew nothing about basketball, but for the past 5 years, I would sit down with kids for 2 hours at a time, and I got a chance to know all the kids and their families and their wants and everything, but I've been able to help them mature the same way I've matured. But I've seen, but also from a mentality standpoint, they've taken my mentality of being serious and being competitive and being a pusher of some sorts with talent and constantly dragging more out of people. I think that's coaching at its core. You're constantly pulling the potential out of people and talking about is enough enough. I think I do a good job with that, be it in business or with people. And I've been able to watch them go out and win 2 national championships and have been a part of that. And that's been like an awesome experience. But it's literally the same story from my book. I don't have any special degree or course that I've taken to these people. It's literally the same things that I took to rebuild myself. I kind of share that with other people, and I think that it works. And so Coach Day had reached out to me, and he said, hey, man, we had some other personal stuff that we had talked about, and then at the root of it, man, he was like, man, how could you help my team? And I said, well, man, look, I can't come with an agenda because I don't have one. I don't have a curriculum. I don't have anything. But I said, if you let me around the people, I'm pretty sure you'll see me helping people, and it'll make sense. You don't have to give me nothing. I don't want nothing. I'll just come and volunteer my time to do it. And so he opened his door and he said, hey, come in every Tuesday. And like anything in life, in order to influence people, you have to have a presence in their lives. And so I would just come talking around kids, and I cuss a lot, when I'm around kids, I tell you that. So I talk a lot of stuff, but replace that word with something else, right? So if you ever see me on the sideline, you just better mute the mic or whatever. If you see me this week on the sideline, I get fired up. I'm like a ball of, when it's competition, I'll be like, I don't care what they think. I'm trying to win, right? But it becomes infectious, and you give kids that mentality. You make them feel bigger than what they are. You make them feel serious. You make them feel like that they can take over the world. And I think most of life is like that. It's all mindset. It's mentality. It's your approach towards the world, and what do you feel you can accomplish. And I think that you end up capturing a feeling inside of you that it gives you belief and confidence. And I think like belief and confidence is like, you can only get it from preparation and the constant process of, as a man thinketh, how you talk yourself up. Whenever you see somebody who thinks highly of themselves, it's like a story that they've told to themselves that they're just outwardly projecting. Make sense? That's all it is, you know what I'm saying? And so if you ever see me sometimes, he thinks a lot of himself, like, yeah, actually I do. That's what you should do, right? You shouldn't think less of other people, but I think every person has the right to think more than what they are of themselves. That's how you grow. And I think like in the sporting aspect, I take that down there to Coach Day and to the kids. And even with him, I was constantly kicking on his wheels. Like, man, keep pressing these people, man. I tell him, look, man, listen to me. The whole town is dependent on you. People want you to win. People want you to be that guy. But, you have to stand inside that moment and be the superhero that the town wants, or the fan base wants. You know what I'm saying? And so, and he receives it, and I love him as much as he loves me. But those are the things I do around sports. My daughter, she's a freshman at Ohio State. She's into video production, so I think since she's grown up in the world of film and social media and creating videos, I think that's why she gravitated to it. And it doesn't compare her to her father too, so I think like she loves that. And I have 2 boys. One is 2 and one will be 5 on December 6th, and I love them to death. And they'll play sports, I'm pretty sure, just because they'll like it, but I won't push it on them for the sake of making it, but I'll push it on them because the discipline and the structure and the rigor I think that sports does for people. I think it just refines human beings. And I think all kids should take, even if it's not your traditional sports, I think like my son, he's in wrestling now. And so since we live in Galena, and man, it's like 5 people in our neighborhood, right? I said, man, you'll be soft, right? So I said, we got to go down to the wrestling room, you know what I'm saying? So I need some kids to kick you and punch you and all that stuff, you know what I'm saying? Okay, look, my daughter grew up in Bexley. When she went to 6 to 12, and I said, look, man, I wish they had some wrestling down here, just a tussle, you know what I'm saying? Listen, I've been to Drexel 1,000 times. Everybody knows me over there. I love these people to death, but I used to be like, look, man, it's a little soft in here, right? Come on. They white glove everything. I'm serious. I'm in Bexley, so I can say a Bexley story, right? So like I would get these girls, right? And so I was like the chauffeur sometimes at night. So like the other parents would go to sleep, and I'm like the younger parent by like 10 years, right? So I'd be driving these little girls around, and it'd be like the smallest things. I'd be like, man, y'all don't really know what life struggle's all about. And I'm like, y'all really don't even know who's driving y'all around. And so they looked at me as Jaden's dad, but I'm like, man, y'all parents probably have a different opinion on me. You know what I'm saying? And it was cool, because these are like the nicest little girls in the world. But I used to tell my daughter, I'm like, man, like, you know, they didn't serve like succotash at lunch. It's not like a big deal. Like, you know what I'm saying? Or, you know, we didn't have the right, like, we used to have these nice sushi rolls. I'm like, yo, Jaden, like, all right, man. No, but I'll tell you this. But the reason why I was pushing adversity, because when I would see, like, I'll say this, and this is great Bexley advice. And from being here for 6 years with my daughter, right? So when these kids, they would get so much anxiety with how to choose a school, right? And I said, I understand why now, because everything was white glove. Like, you come out of class, there's cookies for you, there's juice for you, there's milk for you, there's everything for you. And I said, these kids really never had to figure nothing out. And I said, well, basically, when you pay for private school, you're paying to remove all of the adversities. And like, you're having your kid like be nurtured in a perfect environment, but like, life isn't perfect. It makes sense? And so I seen what my own daughter turned out to be from it. My daughter's a great student. If you need like a great person, individual, responsible, everything, but then I also see some other things where she gets flustered a little bit. And where I grew up in a totally different environment, where I had all of the adversity to get here, I removed it, but I probably wouldn't do that with my sons. And so that's the reason why I take them to fighting, because fighting is typically like a poor man's sport. You follow me? This is intentional. And so I grew up in a boxing ring. Junior high was boxing. And this is poor man's sport. It's a different mentality. And this is very serious.
It's the first I'm hearing about that.
Okay. But it's serious. But this is a poor man's sport, and people who come from little to no means, and they fighting for everything. And so I bring my kids up in that environment, because I said, I've been to the extreme, and I thought the right thing to do was to remove adversity. But really the pain that people experience, like, what is this book about? This book is more about like just pain refining me. Just a painful process. You go to prison, it's the pain, the process, the pain, the process, the pain, the process. And so I don't know how we even landed on this, but I thought since I was in Bexley, it was relevant. Yeah, but listen, I went to Graders 1,000 times. John Eagle, I grabbed lunch from there 1,000,000 times. I've been all through Vegas 1,000, well, not Vegas, Bexley 1,000 different times. We still do the work back home. I digress a little bit, but we still do work with adolescents and adults back home, people who come from jails, prisons, treatment centers. It's some of the best work, I think the most fulfilling work that we do there. And we absolutely do podiatry work. So most things that you see, foot and ankle in Ohio, we have different brands of offices, great physicians that we work with. These people are phenomenal, and that's it. There's other little miscellaneous stuff I do, but nothing serious to write home about. So.
Okay.
Thank you. I want to make sure we save some time for the book signing, so if you have questions, I'll let them ask it in the line. Okay. Maurice Clarett, thank you so much for the book and for all of your work and for sharing your story today. And Bob Eckhart, thank you for spending an afternoon and for the book as well. Thank you so much.